Imagine an army that doesn't build forts, doesn't have supply depots, and doesn't wear heavy armor. Most European generals of that era would have simply laughed at the idea. They sincerely believed that without cumbersome supply trains, it was impossible to win any serious campaign. But 300 years ago, a force emerged on the Great Plains that made them change their minds. The Comanche created a military machine that operated according to entirely different rules of steppe survival. Today, we are accustomed to the idea that war requires sophisticated technology and satellite communications. But back then, in the harsh Wild West, the outcome of a battle was decided solely by endurance and cunning. A Comanche military camp was not just a random place to spend the night before a battle. It was a mobile training center that operated with terrifying efficiency and the strictest discipline. Let's break down their day to understand the secrets of this ancient American Special Forces unit. The day began at the Comanche military camp long before the sun appeared above the horizon. While European soldiers slept soundly in their tents, the Native Americans were already silently on their feet. Why get up so early when they could have slept a little longer before a hard day? Because the morning twilight is the safest time on the open prairie. Enemies have poor vision in the dark, and the cool air allows one to move without rapid dehydration. Modern elite units also prefer to begin their operations in the pre-dawn hours. Right after waking up, no one built large fires to cook a hot, hearty breakfast. Smoke from an open fire can easily be spotted from dozens of miles away on flat terrain. Instead, the warriors pulled out their main secret to survival on the steppe, which was called pemmican. It was a dense mixture of dried bison meat, rendered fat, and sour berries. This strange mass looks as if someone has already chewed it before you. But in terms of pure caloric content, this piece of fat surpassed modern sports gels several times over. The meat provided protein, while the pure animal fat gave the body an incredible, long-lasting energy boost. Modern nutritionists call this approach a ketogenic diet for maximum physical endurance. The Comanches didn't know fancy words, but they understood perfectly how the human body works. A single small pouch of pemmican allowed an adult man to stay active for several days in a row. You don't need a field kitchen if all your food fits comfortably in a saddlebag. At the same time, Europeans were dragging huge wagons loaded with salted pork and flour. It sounds impressive, but such convoys moved at the pace of a tired turtle. And if a wagon broke down on a rough road, the entire party would go hungry until evening. The Comanches watched these clumsy caravans with undisguised surprise and a touch of mockery. Why tie your life to a piece of wood on wheels when you can just ride on? What's interesting is that pemmican could be stored in leather pouches for years without spoiling at all. You could bury it in the ground, return 2 years later, and eat it without a care. Try pulling off that trick with a modern hamburger or an army ration of canned food. Bacteria simply couldn't multiply in an environment completely devoid of excess moisture. It was true preserved magic, created without a single chemical additive. In the morning, the warriors also spent time with their horses, which were their primary weapons. A Comanche and his warhorse were a single, inseparable living organism. The men checked the animal's hooves and carefully combed their manes with bone combs. A horse on the steppe meant far more than the most expensive sports car of our time. Losing a horse in battle was terrifying, but losing it due to poor care was considered a disgrace. They drank very little water in the morning so as not to overload their stomachs before a possible race. They would take a small amount of water into their mouths and simply rinse their throats, spitting the rest onto the ground. Modern marathon runners do exactly the same thing at aid stations during grueling races. Drinking too much causes a heavy feeling in the stomach and hinders quick movement over uneven terrain. The Comanche figured out this physiological fact long before the advent of sports medicine. Clothing in the military camp was as simple as possible and served only utilitarian purposes. No bright feathers or elaborate outfits like the ones we're used to seeing in Hollywood movies. A warrior wore only a loincloth, sturdy moccasins, and sometimes a light leather shirt. Beautiful ceremonial costumes remained in the main settlement and were worn only on holidays. On a military campaign, the main rule was nothing should catch on bushes or hinder movement. Even the war paint was applied not just to look impressive in front of the enemy. A mixture of clay and animal fat provided excellent protection for the skin against the scorching sun and pesky insects. Essentially, it was an ancient sunscreen combined with a powerful step repellent, and the dark stripes under the eyes absorbed the sun's glare, improving vision on a bright day. Modern American football players paint their cheekbones with black paint for exactly the same reason. By the time the sun rose above the horizon, the camp was already fully operational. No one shouted orders or blew a morning bugle, as white soldiers did. Every man knew his task precisely and carried it out with a quiet, almost eerie methodicalness. It resembled the workings of a well-oiled machine, with not a single superfluous part. It was precisely this discipline that had made them masters of the Great Plains for many decades. It sounds incredible, but this complex system operated without a single written code of conduct. Immediately after a modest breakfast, physical training began, the kind that would break an ordinary person. The Comanches didn't build gyms or use iron weights to build muscle. Their main training ground was the endless prairie, and their main equipment was the wild, untamed Mustang. Warriors practiced their riding skills every day, honing their reflexes until they became second nature. If you couldn't ride like a master, you were simply a dead man who had accidentally wandered onto the plains. One of the basic exercises was the ability to hide behind the body of a galloping warhorse. At full speed, the warrior would slide down to the horse's side, clinging to the animal's back with his heel. From this position, he could shoot arrows from beneath the Mustang's neck while remaining invulnerable to the enemy. American soldiers often thought they were seeing a herd of wild horses without riders. And then these wild horses would suddenly open aimed fire at them with bows. Such acrobatic riding required incredible leg strength and a perfect sense of balance. Modern gymnasts spend years learning to control their bodies on the parallel bars. The Comanches did this on a living creature galloping across the prairie at 40 miles per hour. My thighs start to ache just from trying to imagine such colossal muscular tension. They held onto the saddle so tightly as if they were glued to it with invisible, natural glue. Archery training was a distinct art form, incomprehensible to most Europeans. The Native American short bow was made of resilient wood and reinforced with strong animal tendons. To draw its string required a force of about 60 or 70 pounds. Now imagine having to do this 20 times in a row while riding a galloping horse. This isn't just shooting, it's a full-fledged strength workout for the back and shoulder girdle. An experienced warrior could fire about 20 arrows in a single minute with stunning accuracy. During that time, a soldier with a European musket could manage only one clumsy shot. While the white man measured out the gunpowder and jammed a bullet into the barrel, he became a sitting duck. The Comanche's rate of fire was comparable to that of the first models of American magazine rifles. The Europeans' technical superiority in the early years of frontier settlement was nothing more than a beautiful myth. Wooden spears also required constant practice and specific muscle memory in the hands. Warriors galloped at full speed toward grass dummies and delivered sharp, stabbing blows. The main difficulty lay in ensuring the spear did not get stuck in the target and knock the rider out of the saddle. You had to strike and instantly relax your arm so that the weapon would slide back out easily. Modern martial arts instructors call this principle of control the shockwave. Many warriors also practice long-distance running across rough terrain without stopping. A horse could tire, get wounded, or simply be startled by a loud noise in the chaos of battle. If a Native American found himself on the ground, he had to be able to outrun his pursuers on foot. Some Comanches could run 50 miles in a day, outpacing U.S. Army cavalry patrols. Today, people pay huge sums of money to participate in ultramarathons, but back then, it was a basic skill. During training, they often engaged in brutal sparring matches with no rules or referees. Fighters wrestled in the mud, using holds, chokeholds, and strikes to the most vulnerable points. No one stopped a fight because of a broken nose or a tooth accidentally knocked out during training. Pain was the best teacher because it quickly revealed all your physical weaknesses. It looks like modern mixed martial arts, only without the fancy championship belts and prize money. Recovery from such grueling workouts was no less important than the physical exercises themselves. Warriors often used hot stones and steam huts to relax their sore muscles. Sweat flushed toxins from the body, and the high temperature accelerated blood circulation. Any modern physical therapist will tell you that heat therapy is the best way to relieve muscle spasms. The ancient Native Americans created their own saunas long before it became a trendy fad. By noon, the training phase usually ended, and the men sat down to repair their equipment. Sharpening knives and checking arrow fletching required absolute calm and the utmost concentration. You simply couldn't afford to go into battle with a dull blade or a broken shaft. In the wild steppe, there were no stores where you could exchange defective weapons under warranty. Your life literally depended on how well you had tied the stone to the piece of wood. And this rule of survival did not forgive even the slightest mistakes in daily work. The structure of authority in a Comanche military camp greatly surprised and shocked European officers. White people were accustomed to a rigid hierarchy where a general yells at a colonel, who in turn beats a soldier. The Indians had neither kings nor generals, nor formal officer ranks with gold epaulets. It sounds like complete anarchy in which it would be impossible to command even a dozen armed men. But in reality, their system worked much more subtly and effectively than any rigid military regulations. The leader of a military campaign was not the one with the most noble and wealthy lineage. They chose as their leader the man who had the best reputation as a successful and lucky tactician. If you led men into battle and everyone returned with spoils and no casualties, they would follow you again. It was an absolute and ruthless meritocracy, built exclusively on actual results. Your office job requires a degree, but there, all that was required was the ability to save people's lives. The choice of a leader happened spontaneously, without official elections or lengthy bureaucratic procedures. Warriors simply decided whose skills and experience would bring them victory in a specific battle or raid. Reputation was earned over years of grueling trials and could be destroyed in a single wrong decision. Authority could not be bought with money nor passed down from father to son. A leader had to prove his right to lead the unit every day by setting a personal example. If a military leader made a mistake and the unit suffered heavy losses, his career ended that very day. No one staged revolts or wrote lengthy complaints to higher military authorities. The warriors simply stopped listening to that person and went to another, more successful commander. Imagine if corporate employees could simply fire their CEO by silently ignoring him. This forced leaders to be extremely cautious and never risk people's lives for the sake of personal glory. For a former leader, a loss of trust meant complete political death within the military community. He might remain a respected figure in civilian life, but he was no longer trusted to lead warriors. Such a system instantly weeded out tyrants and those prone to taking unjustified risks on the battlefield. The safety of every warrior took precedence over the personal ambitions of anyone, even the most celebrated commander. In the Comanche world, accountability for a mistake was immediate and had no statute of limitations. Decisions to attack or retreat were not made unilaterally, but by a council of experienced warriors. The men would sit in a circle, light a pipe, and calmly discuss the tactical situation at hand. Every participant in the expedition, even the youngest youth, had the full right to voice his opinion before his elders. Modern IT companies call this a flat management structure and pride themselves on their innovation. The Comanche used this brainstorming method back when Europe was burning people at the stake. In such a circle, there was no room for arrogance or for keeping important details of the upcoming battle under wraps. Experienced veterans listened carefully to the newcomers, as a fresh perspective could spot a hidden threat or opportunity. Freedom of speech ensured that all participants in the operation had the fullest possible understanding of the situation. Collective intelligence allowed them to find optimal solutions in the most challenging geographical and weather conditions. This transformed a disparate group of people into a unified and highly dangerous intellectual machine. But as soon as a decision was made, discussions ceased immediately and action began. In battle, the leader's word became absolute law, and orders were carried out without the slightest hesitation. If the leader shouted to retreat, the unit turned around in unison, like a flock of startled steppe birds. There was absolutely no room here for foolish heroism, where a single soldier decides to save the world on his own. Dying in a senseless attack was considered not a feat, but a manifestation of extreme unprofessionalism. Coordinated action was achieved through complete trust in the chosen leader in moments of danger. Every warrior understood that not only his own life, but the success of the entire unit depended on his discipline. The Comanche's maneuverability on the battlefield often stumped the heavy and unwieldy regular cavalry. They could scatter into a loose formation and regroup into a tight formation in a matter of seconds. Such flexibility was possible only through a perfect combination of democracy in council and dictatorship in battle. Discipline was maintained not by fear of punishment, but by powerful social pressure within the group. If a warrior showed cowardice in battle, he was not imprisoned or whipped in front of the ranks. He was simply subjected to the harshest ridicule, and the women refused to sing songs in his honor. For a Native American, losing face before his tribe was far more terrifying than any physical pain. Psychological punishment worked far more effectively than even the strictest military guardhouses of the time. Public condemnation made a coward's life unbearable, forcing him to either reform or leave the tribe. An outcast lost the support of his loved ones and the right to speak at important community meetings. The fear of becoming the object of universal ridicule and contempt was the best safeguard against betrayal. This created incredibly strong horizontal bonds among all members of the military unit. People fought shoulder to shoulder not because they were forced to, but to preserve their honor. An interesting detail lay in how exactly they distributed the spoils after a successful raid. The leader of the expedition often took the smallest share of the booty for himself, giving the best to his men. Why would a commander voluntarily give up wealth that he had honestly earned by right? Because ostentatious generosity was the main way to strengthen his political authority among the warriors. If you were greedy, simply no one would go with you on the next dangerous military raid. This strategy allowed the leader to build a loyal core of the most reliable and experienced fighters around him. The more he gave to others, the higher his informal status rose in the hierarchy of steppe warriors. For a leader, wealth was measured not by the number of horses captured, but by the number of people willing to follow him. This was a very far-sighted investment in future victories and personal safety during campaigns. Generosity was not merely a character trait, but the most important tool of competent political leadership. There were special police units in the camp that maintained order at the encampment. Their members had the right to severely beat anyone who violated the rules of camouflage or made noise at night. They could kill a dog if it began barking loudly at the wrong moment and gave away the camp's location. Even the most authoritative chieftain could not argue with these men during a military campaign. This resembles modern military police, who have the authority to arrest even a general. These police units were formed from the most disciplined and respected warriors of the tribe. They patrolled the camp perimeter and made sure the campfires didn't smoke too heavily. Any lapse could attract the attention of enemies and lead to the destruction of the entire group at night. Control was total and made no exceptions for past merits or high birth. Order in wartime was a sacred rule that ensured survival in hostile territory. Despite the apparent freedom, strict order reigned in the camp regarding the placement of all expedition members. Each detachment knew exactly where it was to set up camp in relation to the leader's tent. This allowed the chief to instantly locate the right person in the event of a sudden nighttime alarm. Chaos in war always leads to death, and the Comanche understood this better than any European scholar. Their camp was a living organism where every single cell knew its exact place and function. The camp's internal logistics allowed them to break camp and set out in record time. Every family and every warrior had specific duties when loading belongings onto horses. Speed of movement was their greatest asset in the endless wars across the vast Great Plains. The precise geometric arrangement of the teepees helped prevent chaos in the event of a sudden enemy attack. The Comanche military camp was a model of efficiency and meticulous planning down to the smallest detail. Europeans looked at this complex system and saw only a savage mob devoid of civilized manners. They completely failed to notice the subtle social bonds that made this mechanism incredibly resilient. While white generals shot deserters, the Indians managed their army through respect and ancient traditions. This flexible structure allowed them to survive even the most hopeless clashes with regular troops. Victory goes not to the one who shouts orders the loudest, but to the one whom people choose to listen to voluntarily. And in this art, the Comanche had absolutely no equal across the entire American frontier. There is a widespread and persistent myth that war was exclusively a male pursuit. Hollywood films show us that women always stayed in the main settlement, weeping as they waited for their husbands. In reality, a Comanche war camp rarely functioned without the active participation of the tribe's women. Women did not merely accompany the men on long campaigns. They were the reliable backbone of the entire military logistics. Without their behind-the-scenes work, the Indian Army would simply have fallen apart on the prairie within a few weeks. The women's presence provided a rear support system that soldiers in regular armies could only dream of. They took care of all domestic matters, allowing the warriors to focus entirely on reconnaissance and tactics. The role of women was multifaceted and included duties ranging from cook to skilled civil engineer. The entire way of life on the campaign was built around their organization and ability to adapt to any conditions. Without them, the campaign would have turned into a chaotic wandering of hungry and exhausted people across the endless steppe. The task of preparing the camp for the night fell almost entirely on the frail shoulders of the Native American women. While the men scouted the horizon, the women set up sturdy shelters in a matter of minutes. They knew how to position the camp so that the wind would carry sounds and smells away from enemies. This is very reminiscent of the work of modern engineering battalions that set up field bases for special forces. Only the Comanche women did this without complex blueprints, noisy excavators, or long lunch breaks. Camouflaging the camp was an art passed down from mothers to daughters over the centuries. They knew how to choose locations hidden by the contours of the terrain or thick thickets of brush. It was important not only to pitch a tent, but also to make it invisible to the watchful eye of an enemy scout. Fires were built in a specific way so that they provided warmth without producing smoke that would give their position away. Such field discipline saved the lives of hundreds of warriors during their deep raids into enemy territory. In addition, they were responsible for managing the vast reserve herds of horses during large-scale migrations. Control was of the utmost importance, as horses were the primary resource and means of transportation for the entire tribe. Controlling 100 frightened mustangs on the open wild step was clearly not a task for the faint of heart. The women were masterful riders and could quickly calm the animals during a sudden nighttime storm. If the herd scattered, the warriors would be left without transportation, which would amount to an immediate tactical defeat. Managing the herd required not only physical strength, but also a deep understanding of animal psychology. The women knew the habits of each horse and could spot signs of unease in the herd in time. They used special signals and sounds to guide the animals in the right direction during rapid position changes. The loss of even a few horses could jeopardize the success of the entire long military operation. Therefore, the management of reserve transport was always entrusted only to the tribe's most experienced and level-headed female riders. Medical care in the field was also entirely in the capable hands of skilled women. They knew dozens of herbs that stopped bleeding, reduced inflammation, and lowered high fevers. To treat deep, festering wounds, they used honey and maggots, which ate away at the dead tissue. It sounds like the plot of a horror movie, but modern advanced medicine has once again begun to use maggot therapy. It turns out that ancient women knew far more about surgical sterility than European doctors of the 19th century. Their knowledge of pharmacology allowed them to treat even the most severe wounds sustained in battle. They knew how to splint broken limbs and suture deep cuts using animal sinew. Female healers held immense authority and often accompanied troops on the most dangerous sorties. Their presence gave the warriors psychological confidence that they would receive help if wounded. High-quality field medicine significantly increased the unit's chances of returning home safely. Interestingly, in the event of a sudden attack on the camp, women never hid behind the men's backs. They boldly took up knives, heavy clubs, or bows and fought the enemy on completely equal terms. American soldiers were often seized with indescribable horror when they realized exactly who they were engaged in hand-to-hand combat with. A woman desperately defending her children and property fought with the fury of a wild beast cornered. Many officers recall that Native American women struck with far greater precision and ruthlessness than even the most experienced men. Women's combat training was not formal. They learned to handle weapons from early childhood. Under the constant threat of attack, every member of the tribe had to be able to defend themselves. Women often became the last line of defense when the main male forces were away. Their courage and determination saved the camp from total destruction by superior enemy forces on more than one occasion. For them, war was not a choice, but a harsh necessity for the survival of their clan. After a successful battle, it was the women who took on the arduous task of gathering trophies and preparing the spoils for transport. They quickly skinned the animal carcasses, repaired damaged equipment, and mended the warriors' torn clothing. It was grueling physical labor that often continued late into the night with no time for rest. Modern armies have massive logistics departments with thousands of staff members for this purpose. For the Comanches, the entire logistics division consisted of a few dozen incredibly resilient mothers and devoted sisters. Processing the spoils required not only endurance, but also great speed in carrying out all tasks. They had to process the meat and prepare the hides before they began to spoil in the heat. The women knew how to make the most efficient use of every scrap of hide and every bone from the captured prey. Their labor transformed the fruits of military victory into tangible resources for the survival of the entire Native American tribe. The entire economy of the military campaign depended on their ability to work quickly and efficiently in the field. Some women even attained the official, prestigious status of warriors and participated in planning tactical raids. They were sincerely respected on par with the most celebrated men and invited to closed military councils. If a woman demonstrated outstanding skills in marksmanship and strategy, no one forbade her from fighting. Comanche society was too pragmatic to squander talent because of some silly gender prejudices. Europeans only came up with the idea of mass conscription of women into the army in the middle of the turbulent 20th century. Such female warriors often became legends, whose stories were told around the campfire for decades. They could lead small detachments and conduct independent reconnaissance operations behind enemy lines. Their opinions were taken into account when choosing a location for an ambush or determining the time to attack a settlement. The Comanche understood that sharp wits and bravery did not depend on whether one was a man or a woman. The main criterion always remained personal effectiveness and benefit to the common cause of the entire tribe. One of the most dangerous and psychologically challenging tasks for women was serving as live bait during complex ambushes. A woman might pretend to gather firewood far from the camp, drawing the attention of a passing enemy patrol. When the unsuspecting soldiers rushed in pursuit of easy prey, they fell into a carefully prepared, deadly trap. It takes nerves of steel to stand with your back to armed men and wait for the right moment to flee. One wrong move, and you become not the decoy, but the first random victim in a bloody firefight. This maneuver required flawless acting skills and precise timing of every movement. It was necessary to lure the enemy deep enough into the trap while managing to escape oneself. The female decoys often risked more than the warriors sitting in safe cover with their bows. Their composure allowed them to wipe out entire cavalry units without firing a single shot until the very decisive moment. It was a true psychological war, where women played the key and most risky roles. Women also served as the primary keepers of the oral history of every military campaign the tribe undertook. Upon returning home, it was they who composed and sang songs aloud, praising the brave deeds of the surviving warriors. This was not merely a form of folk art, but a vital tool for shaping the fighting spirit of the entire nation. If your name was mentioned in victory songs, you automatically gained social status, wealth, and the best horses. They served as a kind of propaganda ministry that functioned perfectly well without newspapers or television screens. Through songs and stories, women shaped behavioral ideals for the younger generation of warriors. They embedded in the people's memory the details of battles, the names of heroes, and the bitter lessons of crushing defeats. The tradition of oral storytelling allowed history to be preserved without writing for many centuries. A warrior's reputation depended largely on how his exploits were described in women's songs. In this way, women controlled social mobility and public opinion within the entire nomadic community. White settlers saw Native American women as nothing more than oppressed slaves hauling heavy firewood. But this was a dangerous illusion born of a total misunderstanding of the harsh laws of survival in the Wild West. In the military camp, they were full-fledged partners, without whom no major victory was possible. They did not wear golden general's stars, but it was on their shoulders that the entire military machine of the prairies rested. Try removing logistics from a modern army, and your elite soldiers won't last even a couple of days. The Comanches understood this undeniable truth perfectly and valued their women accordingly. The most important element of any Comanche military operation was flawless, impeccably functioning intelligence. Venturing out onto the prairie blindly is a surefire way to quickly lose your scalp and end your personal story forever. Many miles ahead of the main camp, small, agile groups of the most experienced trackers were always on the move. They read the plain just as we carefully read the morning news feed on our smartphones today. A broken branch, trampled dry grass, or an overturned rock told them entire dramatic stories. A tracker could look at fresh horse manure and tell exactly when an enemy detachment had passed through. By the depth of the hoof print, they could unerringly determine the rider's weight and even the approximate amount of cargo on the horse. American cavalrymen left so many clues for them, it was as if they were riding across the prairie with their loudspeakers blaring. Modern forensic scientists use complex chemical reagents to search for fingerprints at a crime scene. The Native Americans needed only superhuman eyesight and a basic understanding of the simple laws of prairie physics. But finding the enemy was only half the battle. They also had to quickly relay the information to their commanders. How do you communicate over a distance of 10 miles if you don't have compact radios or field telephones? The Comanches developed an absolutely ingenious signaling system that worked literally at the speed of light. During the day, they used small glass mirrors bought from traders or polished pieces of bright metal. Sunbeams reflected rhythmic flashes, transmitting incredibly complex tactical commands to their officers. This visual system was, in essence, an ancient prairie counterpart to the famous Morse code or binary code. Two short flashes might mean a patrol had been spotted, while one long flash signaled a strict order to retreat immediately. American soldiers often saw these mysterious lights on distant hills, but could not decipher their hidden meaning. Imagine that a cunning enemy is communicating over open radio, and you have absolutely no key to decode the signal. This drove European officers into a state of extreme fury and complete tactical helplessness. When the sun wasn't shining brightly, or as evening twilight fell, the Native Americans switched to using smoke signals. Contrary to the comical caricatures in old cartoons, they didn't send long text messages using columns of smoke. A fire was built using damp grass and then quickly covered with a thick, wet blanket to create even columns of smoke. One column meant caution, two columns meant mortal danger, and three meant a call for all warriors to assemble immediately. It was an ideal emergency warning system, covering vast distances across the plains in a matter of minutes. At night, any visual signals were completely replaced by sound imitations of wild animal cries and nocturnal birds. Scouts communicated through the eerie hooting of owls, the howling of lone coyotes, or the chirping of prairie crickets in the tall grass. They reproduced these sounds so flawlessly that they even fooled real, hungry predators. A U.S. Army sentry could spend the whole night relaxing and listening to birdsong, unaware that killers were communicating. Modern snipers also use very similar acoustic tricks for stealthy communication in dense forests. To secretly mark trails or indicate the direction of travel, they used a clever system of stone markers. Several stones, stacked in a specific order, served as reliable road signs for their troops. A white man would simply walk right past, assuming it was just an ordinary, natural pile of random boulders. But to the trained eye of a Native American, this little pyramid screamed, "There's no water ahead. Head north to the hill immediately." It was the frontier's hidden, invisible internet, accessible only to authorized users with a secret password. Another incredibly effective means of communication was drawings on tree bark or flat rock surfaces. Using charcoal or red ochre, a scout would very quickly sketch pictograms describing the exact composition of enemy forces. Such messages were left in strictly designated locations, known only to full members of the military unit. This strongly resembles the work of professional intelligence agents during the Cold War, who used secret caches. Ancient steppe spies mastered the art of secretly stashing valuable information just as well as modern CIA agents. The speed at which information spread among the scattered Comanche groups simply astounded the officers. The U.S. Army could leave the fort in complete secrecy, but within a couple of hours, the steppe already knew about it. The news was instantly passed from one scout to another, like a baton, for hundreds of miles around. They had created a reliable wireless communication network, a full 200 years before the first cell phone appeared. And this unique network never went down due to bad weather or sudden power outages in cities. Thanks to such incredible intelligence, the Comanche never engaged in direct combat if the conditions were not in their favor. They preferred to simply vanish into thin air, forcing a weary enemy to waste resources on pointless, lengthy searches. Victory does not go to the army that fearlessly charges machine guns with a shout for the sake of a glorious historical feat. The one that wins is the one that knows exactly where the enemy is and strikes them at the weakest and most unprotected spot on their back. It was precisely this total control over information that made this nomadic people a true nightmare for the entire Great Plains. The white generals realized too late that they were not fighting primitive savages, but brilliant masters of intelligence. When the cold night fell over the Great Plains, the Comanche mobile camp did not relax for a single second. Darkness on the harsh frontier always brought with it the threat of sudden death at the hands of members of other tribes. The Apaches could sneak up unnoticed in the dark and slit the sentries' throats before they had a chance to utter a single sound. Therefore, Night Watch was organized with an absolutely obsessive attention to the smallest details of security. Mistakes on the prairie were forgiven only once, and usually that mistake cost the entire sleeping party their lives. The Comanche sentries never stood right next to the tents or by the extinguished campfires, as the Europeans foolishly did. They went far beyond the camp perimeter and hid in the deep folds of the terrain, blending completely into the darkness. If an enemy approached the camp, they would first run into this invisible, wide ring of outer night surveillance. Standing guard by a glowing campfire means voluntarily turning yourself into a perfect target for a night sniper. Modern Army regulations for guard duty strictly prohibit sentries from being in brightly lit areas. For night patrols, cunning Native Americans often use dogs with their vocal cords deliberately severed. Such a dog was simply physically unable to bark loudly and give away the patrol's position at the most inopportune moment. It would simply growl quietly and tug nervously at the leash, sensing a foreign scent long before an enemy appeared. Today, military dog handlers spend vast amounts of government funds on lengthy training to teach assault dogs similar skills. The Comanches solved this complex problem in a rather crude manner, but with absolute and terrifying effectiveness for their survival. Now let's compare this quiet, invisible camp with a night encampment of standard European or American troops. The U.S. cavalry moved with a clanging of metal that could be heard clearly for several miles around. The clanging of iron spurs, the eerie creaking of wooden wagons, and the clinking of mess kits created an incredible level of noise. It resembled not a covert military operation, but some kind of very noisy traveling circus with cannons on wheels. The Comanches could easily track the movements of the American army simply by sound, with their eyes closed. At night, huge, bright bonfires always burned in the white soldiers' camps to provide heat and light the area. Around these fires, sentries in smart uniforms walked slowly, calling out to one another loudly for some reason. A loud, "Who goes there?" echoed across the prairie, alerting the Indians to the exact location of the military posts. To the Comanches, such a camp looked like a giant, glowing Christmas tree, literally inviting an attack. They could watch the soldiers calmly for hours from the darkness, methodically choosing the best trajectory for an attack. European horses at encampments were often tied to long ropes and left completely unattended. They neighed loudly, were frightened by wild animals, and created additional, dangerous chaos within the military perimeter. The Indians could simply creep silently up to the herd, cut the ropes, and scare the horses away with a single loud shout. Leaving the cavalry without horses in the middle of a hostile desert meant effectively destroying it without firing a single shot. Many military expeditions ended ingloriously precisely after such a nighttime theft of their mounts. European soldiers slept in tents, huddled tightly together to preserve the last remnants of heat. If a sudden night attack began, they became entangled in the canvas and could not quickly reach for their firearms. The Comanches slept directly on the cold ground, wrapped in light animal skins, ready to spring to their feet in a split second. Their weapons were always within reach, reliably protected from the night dew by special leather covers. In a critical situation, those precious seconds it took to wake up determined who would return home and who would remain in the steppe. For a very long time, American generals could not understand why their incredibly powerful army suffered defeat after defeat. They constantly blamed bad weather, a lack of supplies, and the innate cunning of the savages, unwilling to admit the obvious. The truth was that the Native American war machine was simply far better adapted to this environment. Their military camp was an organic, living extension of the prairie, not a foreign, cumbersome metal structure. Nature abhors foreign bodies and always tries to destroy them mercilessly by the most brutal means available. It was not until the very end of the 19th century that the sluggish U.S. Army began to adopt the tactics of its prairie enemies. The Americans began actively hiring scouts from other tribes and completely abandoned their cumbersome supply trains. They began attacking the Indians during the harsh winter, when the nomadic camps were least mobile and most vulnerable. Only by transforming themselves into equally ruthless ghosts of the prairies were regular soldiers able to achieve final victory. But to do so, they had to completely rewrite all their clever textbooks on classical European tactics. The system ingeniously created by the Comanche still commands immense respect among many military experts. They squeezed the absolute maximum out of the human body and the meager resources that the harsh wilderness provided. It was a pure triumph of biology and brutal pragmatism over the gunpowder and steel bayonets of vast empires. Their camps have long since vanished from the face of the earth, but the principles of their warfare live on in modern elite special forces. Sometimes, to glimpse the future of the art of war, one must study the distant past very carefully, because the basic laws of survival have remained unchanged for centuries. The Comanche military camp was not merely a chaotic gathering of savage people on horseback with primitive bows. It was a highly effective, incredibly mobile, and utterly ruthless corporation dedicated to survival on the frontier. They combined phenomenal physical endurance, flawless reconnaissance, and a profound understanding of human psychology. When you look at modern advanced armies, you can clearly see a reflection of those very same tactical principles. Only instead of optical sights, they had keen eyes, and instead of radios, simple sunbeams. The history of the conquest of the Wild West is often presented to us as a brilliant victory of high civilization over primitive savagery. But if you look very closely at the details of their way of life, the historical picture becomes completely different. The Comanche were unrivaled engineers of war who successfully held vast territories for centuries. They proved in practice that superior technology does not always guarantee an easy victory over discipline and adaptation. And, to be honest, this forces us to look at our own modern technological superiority in a completely different light.